I was leaning against the worn wood of the corral fence when I saw her. A lone figure trudging up the dusty trail, a bundle swaddled tight against her chest. The sun was dipping low, casting long shadows over the dry land, painting the sky a bruised orange. I'd seen plenty of folks pass through this part of the territory, but there was something about the way she moved, slow, steady, like she carried the weight of the world and yet kept pressing forward, that caught my eye. She stopped at the gate, her face drawn and pale, eyes hollow but fierce. She looked like she'd been through hell, and then some. When she spoke, her voice cracked like old leather, raw from wear and worry. "Please, sir, I'm begging you. My babe's starving. I don't know what else to do." The tiny whimper from the baby was enough to turn my gut to knots. I swallowed hard, wiping sweat from my brow. My own hands were rough and cracked from years of wrestling cattle and breaking this stubborn land, and I had barely enough milk left to keep my own family fed, though that family had long since gone. My wife, Grace, had passed in the last bitter winter, leaving me with this empty ranch and a quiet house that echoed her absence. Still, I couldn't turn her away. Not this woman, not that desperate child. "Come on in," I said, voice rough but steady. "I don't got much, but what I got's yours." She nodded, clutching the baby tighter as she stepped inside the gate. Her hands trembled, cold, or maybe just too tired to hold steady. I led her to the small shed where we kept the cows for milking. The low mooing of the herd felt like the last living thing holding this place together. I fetched the pail and settled onto the stool, careful not to spill a drop as I coaxed what little milk the old cow would give into the bucket. My fingers moved with practiced ease, but my mind was tangled up in the woman's plight. She watched silently, her eyes flickering to the baby, who was wailing now, hungry and raw with need. When I handed the pail over, our fingers brushed. The touch was light, but it sparked something, a fragile thread of connection neither of us spoke aloud. "Thank you," she whispered, voice breaking. "I don't know how I'd make it without this." Her gaze held mine for a long moment, and I saw the edges of something buried beneath that exhaustion. Hope? Maybe, or the desperate need for it. We stood there in the fading light, two strangers brought together by the cruelty of this land and the hunger of a helpless child. I didn't know her story yet, but I was willing to listen. More than that, I was willing to help. The wind rustled through the dry grass beyond the corral, carrying with it the faint scent of rain, or maybe just a promise of change. "Name's Caleb," I said, breaking the silence. "Maggie," she replied, managing a faint smile despite everything. The baby quieted in her arms, finally drifting towards sleep. For a moment, the world outside the fence seemed to hold its breath. The ranch, battered and bruised, felt a little less lonely. And though the road ahead was still long and uncertain, something in that simple exchange, milk and a gentle touch, felt like the first step toward something better. I watched the sun slip beneath the horizon, knowing this was just the beginning. Days passed slower than I liked. The sun rose hot and relentless, baking the earth dry and turning the ranch into a patchwork of dust and cracked grass. Maggie stayed nearby, her presence as quiet and steady as the breeze that sifted through the old oaks. I watched her from the porch most mornings, her hands gentle and sure as she cradled the baby, feeding him bits of whatever she could find or make. She didn't ask for much, but I could see the weight pressing down on her, like the horizon threatening to swallow what little hope she had left. Every wrinkle on her brow told a story I wasn't ready to ask about yet. Sometimes she'd look at me, eyes searching, as if trying to figure out what kind of man I was beneath this rough rancher's skin. One afternoon, as I was mending a broken fence post, she came up beside me, carrying a basket with a few wild herbs and some stale bread. "Figured I could help," she said, voice low but steady. "Got no fancy skills, but I know enough to keep us from starving for now." I nodded, the knot in my chest loosening just a bit. We weren't out of the woods, but at least we weren't alone anymore. We shared small chores, her gathering kindling, me hauling water, and sometimes when the silence grew too thick, we swapped stories about the lives we'd left behind. Maggie spoke of her husband, a quiet man taken too soon by bandits riding through their settlement. She never complained, but I could hear the sorrow etched in her words. "I was just trying to hold things together for the boy," she said once, eyes downcast. But after he was gone, the whole world felt like it had turned cold. I told her about Grace, how she'd fought sickness all through one brutal winter and left me with a hollow house and empty nights. Sometimes I wondered if I'd been a fool to believe the land could ever give back what it took. Still, seeing Maggie care for that fragile babe stirred something deep inside me. There was a fierceness in her quiet determination that reminded me of the grit it took to survive out here. The cattle, my pride and worry, were thinner than ever. Drought had left them weak, and the feed was scarce. Watching Maggie move through the fields with that tiny baby, I realized we both were barely holding on. One evening, after a long day under the scorching sun, I found Maggie sitting on the porch steps, the baby asleep in her lap. Her eyes caught mine, tired but steady. "Caleb," she said, voice barely above a whisper, "I don't want to be a burden. I know you're struggling just like me." I sat beside her, feeling the rough wood beneath my hands. "Ain't no burden," I said firmly. "If we're going to make it through this, we got to lean on each other." She gave me a small smile, fragile but real. As the fire flickered that night, casting long shadows, I caught myself watching her more than I cared to admit. Something about her quiet strength pulled at the edges of my loneliness. But it wasn't just the weight of survival pressing on us. It was the knowledge that out here, help was as rare as rain in July. The world beyond the fence was unforgiving, and neither of us knew what the next day might bring. Still, in those moments beside the firelight, there was a flicker of something new, a fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, two broken souls could find a way forward. The wind had been shifting all day, a restless kind of breeze that carried the scent of rain, or maybe trouble. The sky, once a clear blue, grew heavy with low-hanging clouds, dark and brooding, like they were holding their breath before a storm. I was out checking the fences when I saw them, a group of riders in the distance, moving fast, dust kicking up behind their horses. My heart dropped. Bandits. Out here, they were the kind of trouble that didn't just steal horses or supplies. They stole hope. I called out to Maggie, who was inside, rocking the baby gently in the shade of the porch. "Maggie, get inside. Lock the doors. We might be in for a fight." Her eyes widened, but she moved without hesitation, securing the cabin with a strength that surprised me. She wasn't just fragile. She was a survivor, shaped by the same harsh land that had tried to break me. The riders closed in, and I met them halfway, standing tall despite the pounding of fear in my chest. Their leader, a scar-faced man named Grady, sneered when he saw me. Well, Caleb Granger," he spat. "Seems you've got company. Might as well hand over what little you've got." I tightened my grip on the rifle slung over my shoulder. "You'll get nothing but trouble if you try." Grady laughed, a harsh sound that cut through the thickening air. "Trouble's what we're after. You better make it easy on yourself." Back at the cabin, Maggie stood firm, holding the baby close. I could hear her whispering quiet prayers, the kind only a desperate mother knows. The standoff dragged on, tension knotting my muscles as the riders circled closer. Then, without warning, the storm broke, thunder crashing overhead as rain hammered the earth, turning dust to mud and making the ground slick. In the chaos, I caught a glimpse of Maggie moving toward the barn, her hands steady as she unlocked the feed store. She was risking everything to keep us afloat. One of the bandits charged toward the barn, but I was quicker, stepping between them with a rifle aimed steady. "Leave her alone," I growled. "This ain't your fight." Grady's eyes flicked to Maggie, then back to me, calculating. Finally, with a curse, he signaled his men to pull back. As the riders retreated into the rain, leaving behind a trail of churned earth and broken branches, I felt a rush of relief, but it was mixed with something heavier. The land could be cruel, but men like Grady were worse. Inside, Maggie collapsed onto the porch, soaked and shaking but alive. I handed her a blanket, my fingers brushing hers in a silent promise that I'd protect them, no matter what. Later that night, as the fire sputtered against the damp wood, Maggie's voice trembled. I didn't think I'd make it through today. Thought maybe this was the end. I looked at her, her face softened by the flickering light, shadows playing over the lines etched by hardship. We've both seen too much loss to give up now, I said. But out here, trust ain't easy. You sure I can trust you? She met my gaze, steady and honest. I don't have much, Caleb, but what I have is true. The baby stirred between us, a soft sound that reminded me why we kept fighting. That night, I made a quiet vow to keep them safe, to build something worth surviving for. The storm outside was a reminder. The West didn't forgive, but maybe it could teach us how to endure. The days that followed felt different, like the land itself was beginning to breathe easier after the storm. The rain had soaked deep into the earth, promising a chance for the grasses to grow again, for the cattle to find strength. Maybe, just maybe, we were getting a second shot. Maggie moved with a quiet purpose I hadn't seen before, her hands steady as she helped me mend fences and haul water. Watching her work, I realized how much I'd come to depend on her, not just for the chores, but for the hope she carried in her eyes. One evening, after the baby had fallen asleep, we sat on the porch together, the sky streaked with the soft colors of dusk. The silence between us wasn't empty. It was filled with everything we hadn't said. The losses, the fears, the tentative dreams. I reached out, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. My hand lingered, warm against her skin. You've done more than just help keep this place standing, Maggie. You've helped me believe in something better. She smiled, small but genuine. I never thought I'd find a place to call home again. But here, with you, maybe I have. There was no grand promise, no sudden declaration, just the quiet understanding that sometimes the strongest things grow in the smallest moments. The baby stirred in his sleep, a soft coo that echoed like a fragile promise. I thought about the road that had brought us here, the long days of struggle, the nights filled with uncertainty. And now, in this fading light, I saw a future not yet certain, but full of possibility. We stood then, hands entwined, looking out over the land that had tested us so cruelly. The ranch wasn't whole yet, not by a long shot, but it was ours to rebuild. Whatever comes, I said softly, we face it together. Maggie nodded, her eyes shining with quiet strength. Together, the wind picked up, carrying with it the scent of rain once more. The horizon glowed with the promise of dawn, and as the night settled around us, I knew that no matter how hard this world could be, kindness and hope could still find a way to endure.